The Jefferson County Post would like to welcome Dr. Shane Johnston, Director of Jefferson County Schools. Welcome, Dr. Johnston, to the Post. This is probably our first interview of this kind. You've done a lot of addresses, public addresses, but this time he's going to sit down and answer a few questions that have been on the minds of the Post and the public and kind of update us on Jefferson County Schools. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Always an opportunity to share and share with all of our stakeholders the good things and answer some questions that they may have concerning our school system.
Yeah. Well, we'll start out with the obvious since it's raining today. How are our schools holding up in the rain?
That always plays an impact on everything from transportation. We try to figure in all sorts of things. This morning, on this Monday morning, we did talk with Central Dispatch and our emergency officials, and we were down to just very few roads that were closed. And in each of those cases, the transportation had already worked out plans to go around those. I think it was 4 or 5 roads this morning at 4 a.m. With rain in the forecast, we'll monitor it all week, and of course teachers will take great care of kids, and bus drivers will take care of once they're on the buses as well, and teachers take care of them on campus. So we're going to do our best. Safety is always our top priority of our students and our employees, so we're okay, but we'll monitor that situation, and should the weather forecast dump a much more rain on us, we'll adjust as we need to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, that sounds good. We've missed a few days in Jefferson County. I think we have like 2 days left maybe, and I know in the past some of those days have been for flu, and I know that flu and viruses have been rampant in the schools lately, and then now we have this rain situation that's been going on. Is there a possibility, and I know that this is pure speculation on your part because you have to talk with the state, but in the past there has been some possibility of getting some days forgiven if you go over. Do you think that might be a possibility in this case?
Sure, we'll just take that as it comes. Right now we've used 8 of what's called our stockpile days. We stockpile 10 days, build those into the year. We've used 8 of those. We used a snow day back in November, kind of early, and we were really worried about what the winter may hold with it snowing in early November on us, but to date that's the only day we've used for snow, and then we used 2 days, January 27th, 28th, for sickness. That Friday before, we had 6 schools in the mid-80 range of percentage of kids in school, but we had one school at 72.54% attendance, so they had right at 28% of their kids not there. And Fridays always take a little bit of a hit, so we compared that to previous Fridays, and it was significantly lower. So we made the decision to close schools January 27th, 28th to give everybody that 4-day weekend and try to head that off. We came back then on that Wednesday. Initially numbers were up about 91%, but then gradually got worse, and we actually ended up at 85% total for the district, and when actually about 250 more kids absent that Friday compared to the previous Friday. We met with our supervisors, we talked to the health department, and with the incubation period of flu and that stomach bug, we felt like 5 days would give us a fighting chance to kind of get back. We also, when we sent the message out to parents, encouraged parents, while we appreciate and everybody understands the importance of school attendance, if your child was still trying to get over it, please go ahead and hold them out that other day. Of course, that never came to fruition because on the heels of us being out February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, then we had to be out for flooding. We had at one point in time, in talking to our local officials, about 25 or 26 roads that were closed in the county. And not only do we have to worry about our buses, we also have a lot of employees on the road. And then also the nature of the beast, we have about 550, 575, maybe even 600 high school kids and cars that come each day. So we have to look out for those teenage drivers, and it's not as easy as just putting them on a bus. Our buses that we do run are running a lot of times at near capacity or at capacity, so we can't just say those kids can jump on a bus. And in many cases they have other responsibilities, and parents are counting on them. So we ended up being closed for then Thursday and Friday. So that brings us to 8 days total, 5 for illness, and then 2 for flooding and 1 for snow. We actually have already notified the state about using the days for illness. We have to actually get a waiver to do that. Obviously we're going to do what we have to do. We canceled school to keep everybody safe and try to get well. And then the Commissioner of Education will review that so that those days for sickness actually can be used for part of the stockpile days. That doesn't mean they'll be forgiven, but we actually have. And of course the whole region and most of the states had to take multiple days off because of this illness. So we're not anticipating a problem for those being used for from the stockpile days, but as a general rule, by guideline, those have to be for inclement weather and those type things, or you have to get permission. So more specifically then, if once we go over the 10, then we would appeal to not have to make up those based on the severity of the flu and all the illness that's going on. And it's not like we're the anomaly there. I mean, it's clearly one day last week we were going to try to come back before the floods came, and there we were the only district in the area that still was having class. You know, all the neighbors, or most all the neighbors, had canceled as well. So it's hitting different communities at different times, and it's just a kind of a game of watching the numbers and see how when and if you need to pull the trigger on canceling classes.
I know that information came out kind of in the middle of that, and we're kind of jumping around here, different subject. We're still talking about water, but we're talking about lead in water now.
Sure.
So you released a press release that we carried on the post, kind of explaining that. I know you sent some information home to parents. And is there any update on that? Any changes?
Sure. By the law went in effect a year ago, and basically it says that you have to test all of your sources periodically, and by periodically not to exceed any more than every other year. So we made the decision to kind of get our ducks in a row. We actually used an outside group to identify what water sources needed to be used, and it's not just what you would consider normally a drinking fountain or a faucet. Those things, we have to look at all of our facilities. If we hook up water hose and are filling up water bottles at an athletic event from one of the outlets or water sources, then we also, so we let that outside group identify all the different sources on our campuses, and then we collected samples over Christmas break in December of 2019. Those results started coming back in, and it basically you can stay under, and I think it's 20 billion per part, you know, and those things, and but we exceeded that in some areas, and by statute we have to notify the local health department, the local governing body, and 3 different agencies at the state level involving environment and health and the Department of Education, and we have done that. We did send those out. Each case where any source came back above that allowable limit, we sent a note home. On one side was a note from me that was a generic letter that explained that, and on the other side was specific measures that each school had taken. So if your child is in a school where that has occurred, then your child should have received a note, and we are still anticipating some other results from some other schools back. But you know, the immediate response to those is you turn that water source off. In many cases, at one of our schools for sure, it was classroom sinks that really that's you don't even have to have those, and primarily were being used for washing of hands and those kind of things, but obviously we have other places that goes on. But you turn those water sources off. If you're going to have to, if you do need those sources to be back on to be used, then you have to do some sort of remediation. You repair it, you fix it, and then before it's ever turned back on for use, you follow a procedure there that ultimately ends in retesting it again to make sure it's above the limits. So let me reassure everybody, if any of those came back above the allowable limit as indicated in state guides, those were immediately off and will remain off until they either test above, or they may be just decided that those aren't necessary water sources in the building, and we would leave those off going forward. So we're excited about being able to find that out. Although we had hoped there'd be none, now at least we can identify them and either fix them or choose to get them off and get them out of circulation. And that law only applied to buildings that were built prior to 1998. In our case, we have some renovations, and we have some newer buildings that were built since 1998, and it's my understanding that those do not apply and were not tested in this process.
Speaking of testing and doing assessments, we have just gotten back in Jefferson County, the Department of Education, a pretty substantial needs assessment for the schools, and it has caused what could be termed a considerable amount of concern among some communities. There's a lot of rumors flying around about possibilities of closing certain schools, consolidating certain schools, and you know, if we could just talk a little bit about that, about where you are in the process. Has any kind of decision been made? What will be the steps to decision making, and what kind of timeline we're even talking about something like that?
Sure. The needs assessment, the board hired the Lewis Group architectural firm out of Knoxville several months ago, and they worked for several months to complete a needs assessment. That needs assessment was completed and presented at the board in October of 2019. It came back and showed our buildings in need of just north of $60 million worth of repairs. 60 million, 109,000 and some change there, I believe, is what that came back with. It included everything such as building envelope, roofing needs, a lot of things that you would never see as well. But in that needs assessment, the board then set out, they talked about it a little bit in November and got through the holidays. They had a board retreat January the 18th. It was one of 4 or 5 different items that were on the agenda that day just to discuss and plan. And because a board retreat is basically a work session, and that was held at the Patriot Academy. It was all day on a Saturday. They talked for about 35 minutes, and we tried to come together. There were 5 scenarios presented that day. They were presented just as discussion starters. One is make a prioritized list of everything that the Lewis Group identified, and then start trying to address the concerns and figure out how you want to do that. Number 2 was take the school that scored the worst and needed the most repairs. And by scoring the worst, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the most money, but it scored the worst as far as on their rubric they used, and that would have been Jefferson Elementary, and then fix the other 10. And then scenario 3 was take the 2 that scored the worst, which was Jefferson Elementary and Piedmont, fix the other 9. Scenario 4 basically was just somebody come up with a plan of repairing, renovating, or replacing buildings. Scenario 5 was a plan to reduce square footage, in which it asked board members to discuss the possibility or look at the consideration of possibly combining 4 elementary schools down into 2 in phase 1. Phase 2 then address middle schools, and then at the same time those 2 things were going on, out of capital outlay, be prioritizing the other schools, the newer schools, and those that didn't need as much, and be working on those over a 5, 7, 10-year plan as well. So that was an overview of those 5 scenarios that the board has discussed, but there's been no decision at all at this. As the board continues to look at proposals or scenarios, the board really was just using those 5 scenarios that were given to them that day as a discussion starters, and to see who was open to looking at those type things. There are questions, lots of questions have come about from that discussion, and in an effort to head off some bad information or wrong information getting out, I actually went to, that was the weekend of a federal holiday on Monday. Schools were closed for Martin Luther King Day. So starting on Tuesday, I went to Rush Strong School and was part of a faculty meeting. On Wednesday, I went to Talbot Elementary School. On Thursday, Jefferson Elementary, and I couldn't physically be there Friday, but I recorded a video, and some of my central office supervisors went to Piedmont. We covered the same 5 topics at each of those 4 places, so those teachers and those staff members could hear. This is, again, not even a recommendation or a proposal. It was a discussion starter, so the board didn't walk in that day with just a blank piece of paper and start trying to, find common ground. Obviously, if 5 of the members had said we're absolutely for or absolutely against one thing, then certainly if they were against that, then there was no need to spend time talking about any of those scenarios. So I think now the board's gathering information. They're hearing from community members, both for and against various scenarios. And then, of course, it's not our responsibility per se to fund it. We don't want to get out of our lane. That would be the funding body, and we respect the work that they do. But I think the board is committed to trying to come up with a feasibility of a plan to where it doesn't unnecessarily tax or put an extra burden on taxpayers and those kind of things. So they're trying to look at square footage. They're trying to look at capacity rates. They're looking at the cost of running those buildings each year, and the annual cost and all those type of things. But again, I would just stress there's been no decision. There's been no recommendation. I've not been guided in a board meeting to say study this plan out further and bring us back more information. And then our most recent board meeting last Thursday, again in the work session, it was just mentioned random thoughts about those 5 scenarios and a little bit of question and answer. I was asked by one board member what feedback I had gotten, and we've got lots of questions. We actually wrote down questions in those faculty meetings, and those questions are helping get answers that can be used either for or against, or proceeding or not proceeding. It's actually helping. And as I shared with those faculties in those days as well, should the board give a direction or come up with a plan to do a certain thing that involved those communities, I told them I would be right back in those communities, but instead of at 3:30 for a faculty meeting, it would be at 6 p.m. or something, so that we could make sure the communities were aware of what's being presented, the pros, the cons, and also write down the concerns and those kind of things. But at this point, that's not the case. The board's set to meet the first Thursday of March, and right now, they're just still individually studying those plans and different scenarios. There's been other scenarios mentioned. A student gave us a different scenario, which basically was closing one school and moving, instead of closing one school, close school B and move those kids to A. There's been some other folks that have emailed different ideas. And as I get emails, I will share those with the board members just to say, here's a citizen, or here's a faculty member, or here's a student that's asking you to consider this. So again, right now they're just discussion starters. I think the timeline would be, I am confident that the board will take their time and try to come up with a plan that's physically responsible for all of Jefferson County and the taxpayers, and not just any one school or group. But try to come up with a plan that is going to help everybody for decades to come. Because when you talk about new construction of school building, you're really talking about 50 to 75 years and those kind of things. In those scenarios that were mentioned, where phase one would, in that scenario 5 that was mentioned, that has created some concern and also some positive comments to our board members and to myself. It reduces square footage and those kind of things. And phase 1 deals with elementary, phase 2 middle. And then phase 3, you're fixing the other buildings there to where every community is getting something at the same time, instead of somebody having to wait a decade or so before they get anything. But also it tried to at least look down the road, because in just 30 years, which sounds like a long time, but that's not a long time. But if any of this stuff has to, be financed on the county side and those kind of things, by the time you're paying that off in 2050-ish, give or take a few years, Jefferson County High School will be 75 years old, which means by the time you're paying off a bond or something in 30 years, Jefferson County High School at that time will be the same age that Jefferson Elementary and Piedmont and some of those schools that have the most age on them are currently. So again, the board's just gathering all that information in. We are possibly going to share, and we'll be happy to share with this local media outlet when that happens, an email that is open to the community that comes in, would come to possibly my office or the board or somebody, to where folks that just John Doe citizen may have thoughts and want to share and those things. So we hope to be able to reach out to the community in multiple ways. But right now, those are all steps that are step 12, 13, 14. We're on step 2. Right now, there's not a recommendation or proposal, just a lot of discussion about scenarios. And as that narrows down, then of course community will be involved. And I speak for the board, I think anyways, and myself for sure, we're committed to clear transparency through this whole process. We want everybody involved, and want everybody to realize the thought process and the good or the bad of that. But at least everybody to know what the thought process is and why the board is leading a direction or choose not to pursue a direction.
And that might come in, public input might come in the form of a town hall meeting or something like that. I know that in the past that's something that's been utilized. Of course, in Jefferson County, like many other counties, building programs are always a hot topic. You always have people on both sides. Another hot topic and button pusher in Jefferson County has always been the rezoning option. And that would be in the way I understand it currently. There are schools in Jefferson County, it's sort of a have and have not. There are schools in Jefferson County that have a lot of room, maybe too much room, empty in their schools. And then you have some schools that are not maybe enjoying the other end of it, but they need a little room.
Sure.
So rezoning, is that an option? Is that something that's going to happen in Jefferson County?
I think it depends on what plan the board lands on. I think that needs to be looked at and studied. It was mentioned in last Thursday's meeting. There's an outside group that can help take some of the emotion out of some of those things. And it's with technology today, there's some resources you can use to where you can play with different scenarios. What impact if you put a school here, or if you move this or close that? And again, all those are on the table to look at that. Right now we have one building that is running at 53% capacity. We have another building that's at 97% capacity, and then there's some in between. Schools, having been a building level principal in different roles over the years too, as a principal, you're going to you're probably not going to have too many rooms that are not used. You're going to have somebody in it, but those rooms may not be filled to capacity oftentimes, and those kind of things. One difference too is a lot of times when you talk about new school construction, you're always talking in numbers. When you hear that a school will hold X amount of kids, sometimes that number to an architect's different than a principal, or certainly to a classroom teacher, because the state has so many unfunded mandates and different things that we're required to do. We have RTI, we have speech, we have all these other rooms that are used for some testing of various students of different needs and different things as well. So, sometimes we just need to make sure when we say a school will hold blank, that, that may mean that it'll only hold that if all 900 of them run in there and held their breath and stood, perfectly still. That doesn't mean we can really have school. So we just need to study that out as we're either moving kids or opening buildings, or even if the board decides to close a building and those things. So right now we also, because of a lot of different family needs, home needs, mom and dad's work schedules, we have kids that petition to go out of zone, and there are some of those. But as a general rule, those numbers at last look, a month or so ago, pretty much balance out. So if you've got 20 kids that are supposed to be at one school, but they're spread out at a couple of other schools, and you go to those schools, the numbers would basically, if you send everybody back to their home school, those are going to kind of balance out. But at the same time, we have so many family needs and different needs. We always want to be sensitive to that and try to help our families. So there's lots of things to be looked at. And of course, if the board was to decide to build a building or two, or whatever the plan the board lands on, where that building is would affect. If you had to rezone or have to move just one or two roads over to try to balance out and equity. And under federal guidelines right now too, under the new updates of the federal guidelines under ESSA, which started many years ago and has taken on different names, but under that act, they're also looking at equity, the expenses of each school spent on a child. So balancing some of that out will become more and more important in the years ahead. We even have to look and make sure that how much we're paying teachers is not significantly different in one school or the other. If all the teachers in one building are a certain effectiveness level on the state rating scale, because of the state and frankly our office as well, we want every child to have a high quality education no matter what school building they enter in Jefferson County schools. So rezoning is always a possibility to keep numbers even, but even more so than numbers, it's to keep equity among the opportunities for our students. But again, that'll depend on the plan the board lands on, and again, if that does involve new construction, for sure, where those new buildings are to be located.
It's my understanding that in the Jefferson County Post, several years ago, we did an article, actually projection on this, and it has bared out. The numbers of students in Jefferson County have been declining over the past several years, and the thought process is that is going to continue. We are, as a community, an aging community rather than a young family community. Of course, there could be new industry that comes in. Anything can change that, obviously. But I'm sure that those numbers will also play into the decision making. Questions about some of the great new stuff that's going on, because I know that there's some really good stuff going on at Jefferson County High School involving your vocational programs. Mm-hmm. I know that last numbers, and I haven't looked at this in a while, but I know that a couple of years ago, 80% of our students were on a vocational track. And that's a huge portion of your schools, and so you as a central office and as a Department of Education have tried to answer some needs for those students, and I'd love for you to tell us about what's going on there.
We're committed to all of our students having great opportunity, whether that's a 4-year degree path, a 2-year plan, if they want to go to a local TCAT. Also, we have military as an option, and there's all sorts of things. Our job is to prepare kids for choice and for opportunity, to where if they want to do something, they have a good solid foundation to go and pursue those kind of things. We're really excited about the CTE program. A county commission and school board joined together last year to come up with an academic experience and meet the demand of one of our local industries that just just moved in, and there's more than just that one industry that moved in. There's a national shortage of welders that's coming up in 2021 or 2022 has been predicted, but lots of folks are trying to rally to the call to meet that, including Jefferson County Schools and again Jefferson County, and we appreciate that partnership. Our kids are enjoying that. We had a signing day not long ago in which 5 of our kids, just like you'll see a kid signed to go to college scholarship somewhere and play ball of some nature, they signed 5 internship papers over at Oshkosh, and they've partnered with us. So we've got kids over there involved in internship programs. Our welding 1, welding 2 classes continue to grow as interest goes up in those classes, and we appreciate the instructor and Dr. Campbell's efforts to promote welding. And that's just one of the many avenues. There are other areas as we study the needs and the projections of our community. We have to ask ourselves, what programs do we not have? Because we need to make sure we're turning kids out for jobs that they will be looking for in a few years, not the jobs of yesterday always. Many of those jobs of yesterday will still be jobs tomorrow, but we want to look at that. 2 of the programs that we've done some student surveys for and we're excited about include some IT classwork and those kind of things. While we think that we can offer that coming up in the maybe year or 2 ahead, filling those classes is a little more difficult than some just because of the volume and student schedules and things, but we hope to add IT and have a program plan of study through CTE for that. And then one that the student surveys repeatedly come back and show us that we need to be offering is centers around hospitality and tourism. That is often called culinary arts, and we are studying the impact and how we can get that implemented for our students. Of course, we here right in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains and those things in areas that are largely around tourism, that could provide some of our kids skills and job opportunities and give them a leg up on some of the neighboring counties' kids, our own kids, to have opportunities at some of those jobs in hospitality and tourism. And so we're looking at culinary arts and IT to go along with welding and all the other many programs that our career and technical education offers, because whether those kids are choosing, again, the 4-year path, a vocational school, or immediately to work, we want them to have choice, skills, and the knowledge and the ability to go to work and be productive citizens.
And on that note, lots of great things are happening on the vocational end. Can you tell us what's happening on for those college-bound kids? Because there's, we've had a little academic void there at Jefferson County High School, and a bit of time where our students were kind of having a hard time getting in those Tier 1 and Tier 2 colleges. So what are we doing on that end to alleviate that for those students?
Sure. One, we want to thank our teachers over there who continue to go through trainings and different things to provide additional opportunities, the administrative team. One of the things that we continue to do is try to increase our opportunities for early post-secondary opportunities, and sometimes that's giving our students more exposure to the college rigor of a class and those kind of things, whether that's through AP or again the dual credit or state dual credit and those kind of things. So we want to increase our rigor, and we've started actually that's not just a high school issue. We want to expose our kids no matter where they are. We want them to be challenged. So if they are high flyers, we want them to be challenged. If they're struggling, we want to give them intervention and support to help get them back on grade level. And that starts in pre-K and in K all the way up through. But in high school, by offering that diverse setting and increasing the rigor and the expectations, what we don't want to do is be guilty of not having truth in advertising. Our job is to make sure we offer an academic product that is of high quality so that kids are prepared and those kind of things. But by that truth in advertising, what we don't want to do is kids go through classes in which they feel like they're ready and they're not. So we're working hard on the fidelity of that. As we go back and study our AP scores, we had some positive results that we felt like came out of last year's most recent data release, in which our kids were at the higher than state level in some of those categories, and I'd have to go back and look at the pages, but that makes you feel good when you start comparing yourselves to other places that are known for their academic successes as well. The needle's turned a little bit over the last 5 or 10 years, and Jefferson County High School now starting to be in the conversation among the state when you compare it to other districts that are known for high achievement and those kind of things. Yes, there's a real relationship between socioeconomics and the demographics of where you are. So what our real goal is to meet kids no matter where they are, and those kids that are wanting to get in those Tier 1 and Tier 2, provide them a sound, solid academic experience that challenges them to get to that level, while at the same time bringing the kid that's in the middle up as well, and the kid that's struggling. We want to bring them all along. We all want to walk across the graduation line prepared for that next phase in life, and we're here and stand ready to stand with our communities and with our parents and our stakeholders to offer the best we can every day. Again, we're not Jefferson County perfect schools, but we're Jefferson County schools, and we're going to work hard to make sure we offer a high academic product and do what's best for kids every day.
And with that, we thank you very much for your time. Hey, one more quick question. How's it coming at Jefferson County High School? Softball field,
Sure.
tennis courts, we're good?
Well, we're in the home stretch. The weather's here got us kind of bogged down. When it was dry and we could get a lot done, we hit rock last summer, and now we need to be moving and those things. Tennis courts are ready. We could have a match on those today. We've not moved 3 sets of bleachers back over that we renovated that were over on the other side of campus. That's all that lacks. There's one perimeter fence to go around the shot put area and those things, but the track is ready. And of course, the field is ready for soccer and football and other events this fall. Softball is ready. The field itself's ready. The dugouts are ready. The press box is ready. The bleachers are ready. Finishing out in their hitting facility is all we lack, and it's just been such a muddy mess we can't really get up there to that. But in the next few weeks, as it dries out, it's a show place, and we're excited about all that's been done for our kids. And that was one of the reasons I feel like the board wanted to get that athletic renovation behind us as well, knowing we have this other needs assessment. Rather than trying to balance both the academic buildings and athletics, they were able to get that behind them, pay for that in cash initially, and have that behind so that now we can address the physical needs of our academic buildings. And we're looking forward to that and the use. And I know many coaches and fans and others have come to our facilities recently and really complimented the upgrades, and we appreciate everybody that was involved in that process.
Yeah, for our readers and folks who have not been out there, Jefferson County Post encourages you to go. It is a beautiful facility. Thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate it. As always, good luck, and good luck on the budget season.
Thank you very much. It'll be interesting during budget season. We're excited. But again, we're going to try to put together a great budget that is fiscally responsible and helps our kids and our teachers.
That's terrific. Thank you again, Dr. Johnston.
Thank you so much.